The essence of the yoga of radiant presence is coming to identify what radiant presence is, coming to notice the actuality of this condition. And once you notice the actuality of this condition, it clearly and obviously conveys its nature, and in so doing, this grants realization and liberation. Radiant presence is what you experience, what all reality is made out of. I call it radiant presence. Obviously that's just a buzzword, it's just a made up name. It isn't actually that, it's what it is. But it's a useful designation, so we'll play with that for now. Coming to discover that reality, that your experience is made of something radically different than anything you may be able to think that it is what does the magic. Because it turns out that any and all ideas that you may have about what you are, about what this is, about what reality is, are completely and entirely wrong. Simply because it's impossible to have an accurate idea. So categorically, any idea is wrong, because what this is intrinsically is by its nature infinite, transcendental, completely ungraspable by ideas, by thought, by conceptualization. So therefore, by definition, any idea you have is inaccurate. It's not necessarily completely wrong, but in this case, a miss is as good as a mile. So the whole crux of the issue is, what is radiant presence? What exactly is it? This right here is radiant presence. It is the actuality of infinity. Not as an abstraction. The yoga is the discovery of the concrete fact of infinity. It is instantaneous. It is infinitely differentiated as experiential characteristics. It is entirely dynamic. It is infinitely patterned. It is unresolvable and incoherent. It never departs from itself. It is unique and integral, complete and undivided. Radiant presence can be described as the substance action that entirely makes up reality, that your experience entirely consists of. What is the substance, so-called? It is essentially an infinite field of transcendental. You can leave the key inside, just on the inner lock there. No reason to remove it. The substance is essentially an infinite field of transcendental, dynamic, subtle energy. It is the substantial basis that all experiential characteristics consist of, that appear in and as your experience, the totality of reality. It is the substantial actuality that we refer to as light, thought, sound, all sensation, subtle vibrations, consciousness, presence, being, any experiential characteristics whatsoever, no matter how subtle or gross. What is the action? The action of reality is to appear. This may seem superficially to be static, inert, but on close examination will be seen to be an absolutely subtle dynamism of shining forth, simultaneous appearing, disappearing. This action is intrinsic to the substance, not in a noun-verb combination. What is the yoga? What and how this is appearing is entirely and essentially infinite miraculous. It has no mechanism, no medium, no thing that appears, no perceiver that it appears to, no place where it appears can be found. Essentially, it appears to itself, in itself, as itself, by means of itself, unanalyzably. It is unspeakable, unthinkable, entirely beyond understanding, absolutely infinite to an infinite degree, yet entirely actual. Look for yourself and see the way that this is so. Directly noticing that this is the case, absolutely comprehensively, and exactly the way that it actually is realization of the yoga. So, radiant presence is the actuality of infinity. Now, infinity may sound like an abstract. Infinity, what's infinity mean? Oh, the universe is infinitely big. Infinity is this. Infinity sounds and feels the way humans use it. It's very much like an abstraction. It's like, wow, that's cool, infinity, really neat, leave it to the mathematicians or the scientists. But in actuality, infinity is not abstract. It turns out infinity is the only condition that is concrete. Concreteness is abstract. Infinity is actual. Infinity is manifest. Infinity is real. And reality is manifestly, obviously, and accessibly, entirely infinite. Now it happens that it's possible to overlook this fact, which we'll go into in great detail, no doubt. But nonetheless, discovering that this is the case actually, and discovering what that really means, what infinity really is, and that it is an actuality, is what does the work in this yoga. When you discover that this, your experience and all the conditions that seem to exist as your reality, as your life, as your embodiment, as the world, as other beings, as all these things, when you discover that all of these seeming conditions that exist are actually infinite and unresolvable, the implications of that are profound. And of course this is what does the work of the yoga, simply noticing this infinity, noticing that things are intrinsically unresolvable. So it's not an abstraction. Infinity is actually concrete. It's actual. It's the only actuality. You cannot find any non-infinity. It cannot be found. So the yoga is the discovery of the concrete fact of infinity. And that's simply that discovery does the work. There's nothing else needs to do it. It's not like you need to sit in meditation or, put your body in funny postures for hours at a time or say funny foreign words or, wear funny clothes or adopt a funny name. All these things, you can do these things. They're fine. They're all very well and good. They're just completely irrelevant. They have nothing to do with liberation. They have nothing to do with realization. So some of I list a bunch of properties, or let's say relative properties of radiant presence down below, and we'll go through them. These properties are not actual. It's not actually like that, but they're indicative. The way radiant presence actually is cannot be said, cannot be thought. So all of these sayings and thinkings and designations are approximations. But they are useful in that they are more or less radical departures from consensus reality, from a normal, quote-unquote, worldview of what is going on here. So, this condition here, this that I'm calling radiant presence, is instantaneous. It only exists now. Like right now. Not like kind of now. Not like the last 5 minutes and the next 5 minutes. Now. It only exists now. It only exists now. This is noticeable and discoverable. It's very obvious, in fact. And simply noticing that fact alone is rather a nice wedge to drive into the cobweb of confusion, of misinterpretation that is easy to have set up housekeeping in your mind. So it is instantaneous. It only exists now. And again, that's not actually an accurate statement because it can't be said. It's not actually like that. But it's useful to look at that because again, it's contrary to much normal worldviews. It is infinitely differentiated as experiential characteristics. What does this mean? It means that right now you're experiencing infinite information. You're experiencing more information than any quantity you care to look at, and more than that, and more than that, and more than that, and more than that, and we could sit here till the end of time saying and more than that, and it would still be more than that. Just right now. So how many colors are you seeing right now? Right? It's not like, well, I'm seeing about 6. Well, okay, let's go to 12. You know? It's not like that, is it? Anywhere you look, there's a specific, differentiated, unique color in your field of vision. I'm just using vision as an example, but this implies, of course, to the full field of experience. Anywhere you look, there's exactly the color you're seeing. But even that exact color is not exact, and if you look closer, it turns out to be differences next to each other, and you look even closer, and those turn out to be differences next to each other, and you can go on forever, literally. And you will never come to the end of the list of all that you're experiencing. And this is just in a single instant, which of course is the only thing we have to investigate anyway. And this applies not just to vision, as the example I used. Of course, it applies to, hearing, field of hearing, field of sensation, field of thought, field of smell and taste, field of any other subtle experiential characteristics that aren't categorizable in those 6 senses, and so on and so forth. Basically, all experience is infinitely differentiated. In other words, if you look at any tiny portion of your experience, there's an infinite amount of information there. And you look at a tiny portion of that, and there's an infinite amount of information there. And you back up and look at the whole thing, and there's an infinite amount of information. The nice thing, one of the interesting things about infinity is you don't get more infinity and less infinity. So a little piece of infinity has as much in it as the whole, as the totality, if there was a totality. It's rather, it has rather strange properties from a rational or logical point of view. It is entirely dynamic. Stasis cannot be found. Constancy cannot be found. All experiential characteristics are instantaneously other than they are. And this happens in real time. This happens now. It's not like they're a certain way now and then they become some other way. It's like, no, even now they're already something else. And this, of course, is endlessly weird, and you can't wrap your head around it, but then there we go. So, entirely dynamic. And just looking at this dynamism alone is a real powerful wedge again into discovering this actuality. Nothing is anything because it's already something else, experientially. As soon as you experience something, it is something else. And not even to say it's as soon as, which of course language implies is meaningless because there's no as soon as, there's only now. And now is different than itself. I mean, how weird is that? The conditions that present now are different than themselves. Endless weirdness. And how can that stand up to any kind of a normal worldview? Well, we're sitting here in this room, and we're just hanging out and having a talk, and then these descriptions are so pathetically inaccurate to the astoundingness that's actually occurring here. Okay, radiant presence is infinitely patterned. These characteristics, infinite experiential characteristics that radiant presence presents as, tend to form these amazing patterns and interconnections and cross-correlations and in myriad ways, in multidimensional ways, in ungraspable ways, but profound ways. And there's no limit to how profound this interrelationship and interconnection is. And this, of course, is part of the problem of confusion. This is part of the problem that leads rise to the theories of materialism and the theories of objects actually existing. If your experience just looks like snow all the time, like an old TV used to look when they weren't broadcasting a channel, materialism would be kind of hard to come up with, because there'd be no bodies, no environments, no nothing. It'd just be. But it doesn't, does it? It looks, wow, there's all this apparent patterns and information and seeming structure and all of these, cross correlations. And again, I'm tending to use the field of vision in my discussion here, but this applies across the board to all aspects of experience, any and all aspects of experience. You can see this very easily. It's very obvious in sensory experience, but if you close your eyes and look at the inside of your eyelids, at first you'll see sort of these subtle, sort of infinite, minute little flashes of light and patterns of grays and so on and so forth. But you'll notice right away there's all of these patterns, these subtle patterns and cross-correlations and pseudo-shapes, and all start to present themselves and drift. And they never really resolve into any coherency, but they present. And all experience, all of the radiance by its very nature, tends to cross-correlate with itself this way. And yet, paradoxically, it's unresolvable and incoherent. So, all patterns are virtual patterns. They aren't actual patterns. You go looking into any patterns, any structure, any experiential patterning whatsoever, and you find every portion of it is actually different from every other portion of it, radically so and dynamically so, and becoming differenter every instant. So it's kind of like a pointillist painting or something, where you have these pseudo patterns, but as you go into it, there's no actual coherency. There's no actual patterns. The patterns themselves are made of patternlessness. I mean, how does that happen? How can you do that? How can that work? And yet, this is experientially discoverable. So all of this patterning is actually unpatterned. How weird is that? It never departs from itself. It never becomes anything else. It's always just this. In all of this infinity, all of this unresolvability, all of this differentiation, it is always itself. It never changes, it never moves and becomes something else, it never leaves itself, it never becomes two. It is unique and integral. It is unique. There's it. Period. It is itself, even though there's no itself findable as a whole, and yet the wholeness of it is obvious. It is complete and undivided. So you'll notice that all of these relative characteristics that I'm attributing to the radiance are very paradoxical. They contradict each other. They make no sense. This is completely irrational, and yet is discoverable experientially, which is why I can call it infinite. It is palpably and obviously infinite. Infinity contradicts itself effortlessly. If any of you that have ever made any kind of a study of the theory of infinity, or the nature of infinity, or discovery of infinity, is really weird, really slippery stuff. So, now, and all of these characteristics of radiant presence we've been talking about don't actually exist like that. They're not actually like that. This is all bullshit. It's not true. It's not really like that. It transcends that. It transcends any way of looking at it. And yet, all of these characteristics are a potential doorway to discover that fact. By looking at any of these characteristics, if you look at instantaneity, if you look at infinite differentiation, if you look at entirely, completely dynamic, if you look at infinitely patterned, if you look at unresolvable, incoherent, these are good jumping off points to discover what it actually is. Even though it isn't actually that, these approximations are powerful to deconstruct more heavy-handed approximations that we're used to holding, such as, persistence of history, persistence of space, persistence of time, causality, so on and so forth. All these, just the obvious characteristics, parameters of normalcy of a consensus reality worldview. Okay. So radiant presence can be described as the substance action that entirely makes up reality, that your experience entirely consists of. Now you notice I have substance action as a slash, and I also have it in asterisks. And this is to point out that these are wild euphemisms and radically inaccurate. There is no substance and there is no action. However, again, it may be useful to look at it in these terms, even though it's not the case. But radiant presence, what it is and how it is, what it is being the substantial aspect and how it is being the action aspect, entirely makes up reality. There's nothing else. There's nothing else going on. There's nothing else exists. You are that. The world is that. The universe is that. The gods in heaven are that. Dog shit is that. I mean, this is what we got. This is just what we got here. This is what is actually here. So, what is the substance? Again, in asterisks and heavily qualified. There is no substance. But what is the substance? It's essentially an infinite field of transcendental, dynamic, subtle energy. Well, that's evocative, but complete gibberish. So you might say that to the extent there is any of this, which there isn't, there's an infinite field that is something. It is something. To the extent there's anything, this is something. This is as something as we got. It may not be something, but it's it's the closest approximation we can come up with. If there was a something, it would be this. Turns out there isn't, but we'll get there later. So, it's essentially an infinite field of transcendental, dynamic, subtle energy. So that's what this is. That's what the light is. That's what the statues are. That's what your thoughts are. That's what your emotions are. That's what these very, very subtle little, moods and vibes and stuff that we have absolutely no qualification for are, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, forever. It's this one stuff. Not actually stuff, but if it was stuff, it would be just this one stuff is what everything is. The substance of it, what it's made of. Everything you're seeing and experiencing to any degree whatsoever is palpably this that I'm calling radiance. It is the substantial basis that all experiential characteristics consist of that appear in and as you experience the totality of reality. Now, embedded in there is kind of a key notion. Your experience is the totality of reality. There's nothing that's outside it. Nothing exists outside it. Your experience is everything. There is nothing else. Now that's kind of a radical notion. You don't know if I exist, except as an apparition within your experience. You don't know if you exist, except as an apparition within your experience. You don't know if the world exists, except as an apparition within your experience. Your experience is it. There's nowhere else. There's nothing else. There's nothing, there's no other, there's no more. Your experience is, those old-fashioned medieval paintings where they show the sailing ship sailing to the edge of the world and falling off. The edge of your experience, if it had an edge, that's what that would be like. It turns out it doesn't actually have an edge, so it's kind of weird that way too, but it comes with the whole infinity thing. Julie, would you grab me a few paper towels?
Yes.
Thanks. So, it is the substantial basis that all experiential characteristics consist of, that they're made of. Everything you experience, all reality, all actuality, is made of this that I'm calling radiance. Consists of nothing else whatsoever. Very much like when you're asleep and you're dreaming, everything you see in the dream is made of dream. You see a building, it's not made of bricks, it's made of dream. You're talking to a person, they're not made of flesh and blood, they're made of dream. You look at yourself, your own body in the dream, it's not made of flesh and blood, it's dream. The entire thing is dream. There's nothing there but dream. Appearances to the contrary notwithstanding. So likewise, there's nothing here but radiance. Every single thing, condition, experiential characteristic whatsoever is this actuality that I'm calling radiance. It is the totality of reality.
You really know his Kleenex, right?
This is good. Thank you. It is the substantial actuality that we refer to as light, thought, sound, all sensations, subtle vibrations, consciousness, presence, being, any experiential characteristics whatsoever, no matter how subtle or gross. That's just redundancy. That points out that anything you can think of as being an it, as being an actuality, is actually radiance. Now, radiance has the astounding property, it's infinitely differentiated from itself in terms of how it appears, how it presents. So it has the astounding property of being able to look like anything. It can look like light, it can look like, experientially look like sensation, it can look like touch, it can look like thought, it can look like moods, it can look like emotion, it can look like assholes wanting to bomb Middle Eastern countries. It can look like all of these things, all of these conditions, but it is itself. It is this amazing actuality that I'm calling radiance. And that's a simple fact. It is like that, and this is discoverable directly. Okay. So earlier on, I referred to radiant presence as being described as the substance/action. Okay, so that's talking about the substance. Let's talk about the action. The action of reality is to appear. So this is, what's this doing? It's showing up. It's looking like all of these conditions. It's looking like your experience. It's looking like reality. It's looking like the world. It's looking like history. It's looking like the universe. It's looking like all of these seeming experiential conditions. This is what it's doing. This is the action part of it. It may seem superficially to be static and inert. It's easy. Consensus reality view is sort of, well, this stuff is just here. It's just sitting here. This computer is just here. It's not doing anything. It's just sitting here, right? It's like taking up space. It's not. It's easy to have a sense. There's nothing happening here. There's no doing. There's no, activity there. This is entirely false, because the computer appears. If the computer didn't appear, I wouldn't see it. And this appearing, even though it's very subtle, very delicate, very obvious and heavy-handed simultaneously, is being done. It's actually happening. It's an activity. It's an action in real time, of course, because real time is what we got. This is instantaneous. Now is it. And everything shows up now. And it shows up. It's showing up. Things that are sitting there not doing anything, not moving, seemingly completely inert, are totally and absolutely dynamic. They're appearing. You know, it's like watching a movie. You know, suppose some really annoying artist filmed a rock sitting in a desert, completely not moving for 2 hours, and suckered people into going to watch this movie, staring at the rock not moving for 2 hours. You know, but that rock is appearing on the screen in the movie. Every frame, it's appearing. You know, it's not, nothing's happening. The rock's not doing anything. It's not moving. It's just sitting there. But in actuality, it is doing the same thing. The rock is doing just as much as Indiana Jones is running away from the Nazis and shooting at each other with all of this crazy wild stuff. None of that's actually happening. All they're doing is appearing. And that's what's happening here. Things appearing. When there's seeming action, you know, I wave my hand as like action, no big excitement, right? But all that is just appearing. You know, my hand's just sitting here not moving. There's no less action there. Because the only actual action is appearing. And all the relative action of motion and apparent transformation and so on and so forth, interaction, is an abstraction. Because the only thing that's actually happening is the appearing. When the Nazis are shooting at Indiana Jones and they're chasing each other in jet planes or whatever, there's no motion happening. It's just light appearing frame by frame on the screen. And that's what's happening here. This is appearing. That's the sum total of the activity here, is instantaneous apparition. It can look as if it's obviously interpretable as if there is all of this interaction and all of this, you know, all this cause and effect and all of this seeming event, but that's just an abstraction. The actual event, the sole event that's here, is apparition. Just the now, just this flash. It's the only thing that's actually happening. So that's the action. The action of reality is to appear. The action of the radiance is shining forth. This may seem superficially to be static, inert, but on close examination will be seen to be an absolutely subtle dynamism of shining forth, simultaneous appearing, disappearing. All seeming conditions appear in the instant, and they disappear in the instant. It's not like they appear and they hang around for a little while and then they disappear. The appearing is the disappearing. And again, this makes absolutely no sense. How can you wrap your head around it? How can appearing be disappearing? And yet it is. You know, this is why time seems to pass. Because as soon as something shows up, it's already something else. I mean, it's already something else. How does that work? You know, it's completely mind-boggling. It's dizzying. It's beyond insanity. But there you go. This action, the action of this shining forth, this appearing, is intrinsic to the substance. It's not a noun-verb combination. It's not like the substance of radiance is appearing. So here's the substance and it's doing something. The substance is an apparition. The apparition is the substance. In terms of language, we sort of have to put it in terms of noun-verb combinations, but it's not actually like that. We're talking about one condition that seems to be the noun, the sole noun, and seems to be the verb, the sole verb, and actually is neither. It's actually not a thing, and it's actually not an action. It's transcendental. It cannot be said what it is. But again, looking at it in these ways can be useful as a jumping off point to discover the way that is so, the way that it actually is. So what and how this appearing is entirely and essentially infinite/miraculous. It has no mechanism, no medium. There's no projector shining it forth. There's no screen that it's hitting and shining on. There's no thing that appears. Nothing actually appears. Even though there's seeming appearing, nothing is actually appearing. There's no perceiver. Even though it's being seen, there's nothing seeing it. It's just appearing. I mean, how does that work? How does something just appear? Well, you can't say. That's the point. It's miraculous. It's infinite/miraculous. Well, here it is. It's just appearing, you know. And of course, we're all very used to assuming, well, there's appearing, so there must be something appearing, and there's someone seeing it, or something seeing it, right? I mean, we're all very familiar with this logic, and it's a wonderful logical construction. It just happens to be totally false, completely inaccurate. All there is appearing, and appearing equals perceiving, and there's nothing to perceive and nothing to perceive it, and yet there's perceiving. How's that work? Well, there you go. No thing that appears, no perceiver that it appears to, no place where it appears can be found. There's no here. It looks as if there's a here, right? I mean, there's appearing, and it looks like it's appearing here, it looks like it's appearing now, it looks like it's appearing as this, it looks like it's being seen, and yet none of those can actually be found. All you can find is the appearing itself, and even that is not resolvable. You start to look closer and closer into this actual appearing, and you don't find anything. Essentially, it appears to itself. The radiance appears to the radiance. The radiance appears in itself. The radiance appears in the radiance. So the who is the radiance. The where is the radiance. It appears as itself, so the what is the radiance. By means of itself, so the mechanism of that it does all this whole magic show is just its own nature. It by its very nature does this, is like this. Unanalyzable. You can't make any sense of it. You can't get to the bottom of it. You can't find all these assertions are all bullshit. They're not true. They're not accurate. Because you can't actually find anything like it. But again, these are potentially useful jumping off points to notice that fact, to discover that condition, that, as weird as this description is, the reality is weirder than that, to the power of infinity. I mean, this is kindergarten. All this whole wildly absurd narration I'm putting forth is kindergarten, lies, storks and Santa Claus. It ain't actually like that at all. It is unspeakable, unthinkable, entirely beyond understanding, absolutely infinite to an infinite degree. And yet, here's the kicker, it's entirely actual. It's real. This is it. This is that. This is like that. And it is, and there is nothing else than this being like this. Even though you can't find it, you can't pin it down, you can't define it, you can't sort it out. It's real. This is it. It's happening right here. This is it. And it's all plain to see. It's plain to examine. All of this is happening completely accessibly right here. It's not hidden. It's not concealed, except by its own weirdness. I mean, the real concealment of spiritual delusion, the real concealment of spiritual confusion, is just how weird the reality is. You look at this and you say, it couldn't be that weird. Come on, it couldn't be that far out. So then it's so easy to settle for some, even if it's radical, some simpler explanation. I mean, even God's in heaven, Krishna doing a dance, or Shiva doing a dance or something, is somehow, as far out as that is, it somehow makes a little more sense than this actuality, which is way, way weirder than that. But no explanation can be accurate. No explanation can actually accurately indicate this, can touch this, can contain this. But it doesn't need to, because again, it's actual. We have the real thing right here. So you can play with it, you can check it out all you want. And if you look at it without bias, if you look at it without preconception, it will show you what it is. It will show you how it is. Because it's not hidden. It's completely, it's all out in the open. It's revealing, it's flashing itself. So, look for yourself and see the way that this is so. This is the yoga. Check it out. Okay? So, these are some possible, the foregoing has been some possible seed notions, some possible jumping off points for exploration, for investigation. And even though none of these conditions are actually the way they're being put, they are potentially useful or powerful as jumping off points into the actuality, which is the way it is, and which intrinsically, completely, and utterly transcends any of these approximations. And you will discover that fact by jumping off from any of these approximations. Look for yourself and see the way that this is so. This is the yoga of radiant presence. Just look at your experience and let it show you what it is. It's always showing you what it is. Just listen. Stop telling it what it is. Stop saying it's a world. Stop saying these are people. Stop saying I'm a human. Stop saying this is a body. There's no labels. There's no label here. There's no sign that says I'm a world. There's no sign that says I'm a body. There's no sign that says I'm another human. These are interpretations that are imposed in imagination, which of course imagination is the radiance. What else could it be? Radiance is everything. But it's just imagination is just radiance. It's not about anything. It doesn't actually capture or indicate anything. It's just because nothing is doing anything other than this flash, this instantaneous flash of energy that's shining forth. That's the reality, that's the actuality. And this is directly discoverable experientially. And discovering this, obviously, has profound implications on the feeling tone of your life, your history, your satisfaction quotient, your motivations, your whatever. and this impact that this discovery has on these things is what is referred to in spiritual terms as liberation, or realization. Because when you realize that there's just a radiance relating to itself, the implications of you and your life sort of pales in relevance. So, directly noticing experientially that this is the case, all the foregoing, absolutely comprehensively. In other words, this is it. This being the way it is comprehensive. It includes everything. There's nothing else. There's no more. There's nothing outside. It's not like, yeah, well, all that's great and that covers most of it, but what about? There's no what about. This is comprehensive. What this is everything. Yeah. Everything with a capital E, with a small e, with no e. It doesn't matter. It's everything. The whole shooting match. The complete enchilada. Directly noticing that this is the case, absolutely comprehensively, in exactly the way that it actually is. It is the way it is. It's not the way you may think of it. It's not the way I'm describing it. It is the way it is. And this is discoverable, this is observable. It will show you what it is, even though you won't be able to say or think it. It will nonetheless reveal itself. It will show you what it is. It reveals itself to direct observation. It's not hidden. So directly noticing that this is the case, absolutely comprehensively, in exactly the way that it actually is realization of the yoga. When you see what this is, when you see what you are, when you see what's happening here, this is realization, this is liberation. At that point you can declare, you can put Buddha in front of your name and hang out a shingle if you want. And you can do that anyway, who gives a shit? Not that it'll impress people, but it might impress a few suckers. But that's it. There's no more than this. There's no better than this. There's no more profound than this. There's no deeper than this. This is it. This is real. And reality is right here, right now, nowhere else, and you are it. This is it. That is not hidden. So the whole yoga is just check it out. Check out that fact. Check out your experience. Look at it. And all of these approximations here are just to give you a few hints to play with, a few jumping off points to toy with if you're interested, or make up your own. It doesn't matter. If all of this is so plainly revealed, how come no one recognizes it? How come so few people actually notice this astounding condition as it is? Well, everyone notices it. Everyone notices it. You know, look at a 2-week-old child, 2-week-old baby. You know, they don't know this is a world. They don't know they're in a body. They don't know anything. It's just you know, right? And we've all been there, and we never left. You know, there may be veneers piled on top of apparent sophistication, and we learn a language, and we learn this is a computer, and this is a chair, and this is a body, you know, and that's a person. But these are all just games, playing games at displaying skill or arguably lack of skill in terms of designating apparent imaginary entities that are grouped out of your certain sets of experiential characteristics in your experience in imagination. And all of these layers that have been piled on top of our naked recognition of this condition, they never stopped it. You're still the 2-week-old you were, you know. And again, you know, it may be difficult to notice that fact, except perhaps when you're falling asleep or you've overdosed on acid or passing out drunk or doing an 8-hour meditation marathon or something. But basically, this is accessible. You know, we already know this. We already are this, so it's actually completely accessible. But it's not validated within our culture. It's not. No one's talking about this. No one's describing this. No one's validating it or reinforcing it or saying, "Yeah, wow, it's amazing, isn't it?" It's all like, "Hey, how you doing? What'd you do yesterday?" You know. God, I think they're going to bomb Syria. Who gives a shit? You know, that's just the usual. That's just, you know. Every day there's headlines. And there's going to be headlines tomorrow and headlines the next day and headlines the next day. Who are we bombing today? You know. But all of that narrative, all of that layer of interpretation, all that storytelling takes place in the context of this actuality, which you are, which alone exists, and which it turns out is supremely powerful and supremely transformative to investigate directly, even though, again, culturally it's not encouraged or reinforced. And that is yoga of radiant presence. Now, interestingly, nothing other than this investigation is occurring. Everyone's normal experience, everyone's mundane experience of schlepping through their pathetic lives is in actuality radiance exploring itself. Nothing other than that. So in a powerful way, doing this yoga is simply settling into what you're always doing. It's going with the flow. It's going with the stream. It's simply relaxing into the natural action, the natural condition of this shining forth, experiencing itself, unendingly. Always has and always will. So this is the natural yoga. This is the easy yoga. You know, it's simply being what you are. Right? You're already doing it. You know, and yet, the more primally you let yourself notice you're doing it, the more primally you notice the astoundingness of the experiential actuality, what it is and how it works, the more efficiently it takes advantage of that fact. And this is the difference between, in spiritual terms, between delusion and realization. A realized being has a certain perks, a certain sort of trickle-down advantages to seeing what one actually is, what this actually is. It doesn't mean that they're special. It doesn't mean that they've got something everyone else doesn't have. But by being with this activity, this event, this condition, as it actually is, one efficiently gets to take advantage of that fact. And of course, you know, and again, I can't possibly pin down what I mean by that, or verify it, or even say anything more about it. But it happens to be the case that even though everyone is doing nothing other than this yoga, the more primal a level, let's say, the more immediate a level at which you engage with it, the more efficiently it, let's say, accelerates itself. And it's endlessly accelerating. You know, the radiance is exploring itself. That's what's happening here. It's what's always been happening here. It's what always will be happening here. That's what reality is. Reality is the radiance exploring itself. And it looks like your experience. And the more primally you experience it as the radiance exploring itself, the more efficiently the radiance explores itself, and the whole thing kind of feeds back on itself. It snowballs. It takes off. And this is what constitutes the actuality of realization and liberation. I'm going to give you a little sheet which has the totality of yoga radiant presence mapped out very concisely. We'll be going over this tonight in great depth. Let me read it over to you, and then we'll go through it point by point. Yoga of radiant presence. Yoga is radical engagement of discovery. Presence is actuality, being, reality. Radiant means presenting as intrinsic characteristics or qualities. Radiant presence alone exists. We call it experience. It is nothing more than an inherent, unstoppable, profound engagement with itself. This engagement is exploration, investigation of itself. An aspect of the way that this is so can present as complex interpretations of the radiant presence as being entities, worlds, histories, problems, etc. In this apparent mode, its exploration can seem relatively inefficient. It can also present as a more radical engagement with the radiant presence as itself, with fewer harmonics of interpretations, knowing itself more radically, more directly. This is yoga. In this mode of engagement, it more obviously partakes of its inherent qualities: miraculousness, absolute independence, omnipotence, omniscience, etc. This is realization, liberation, God consciousness, and so on. To practice this yoga, notice any aspects of the radical condition experientially. Presence, radiance, unstoppable engagement, inherent intelligence, multidimensionality, non-locality, omnipresence, unresolvability. These aspects are unwaveringly inherent, so always available to notice. And doing so will direct engagement towards a more radical, profound discovery of the actual condition as it is, revealing liberation from any apparent worlds of entrapment. So, what's that talking about? What's that referring to? What's that about? What's really going on? For the present, we'll skip over the first definition and start with radiant presence alone exists. We call it experience. This that is right here, what is here? What is actual? What's going on? What is there? What exists? Well, what can you find? What do you find? What do you find? You find your experience, don't you? Can you find anything other than your experience? Anything you find is in your experience. Your experience is what exists. It is actual, it is real. And in terms of radiant presence, it is present, i.e. actual, here. Presence, it cannot be defined. You can't say what presence is, but it's completely self-evident. Experience is present. Reality is present. This is here. This presence is, well, I was going to say this presence is important, but it's so far beyond important. This presence is the very essence of everything. Its profundity is limitless, literally limitless. It's just this simple presence, this completely obvious fact of here this is. Experience is, it is present. Of course we take it for granted, it's always present. It's like fish in water. Water's always there. You don't pay attention to the water, you squirt around looking at the other fish and look for food and all, but the water is everywhere. And likewise, this presence, that this is here, that this is in your face, so to speak, is unspeakably profound. We're used to not noticing it and taking it for granted. It's like a clear window we look through to see all the details of our life, which seem much more interesting and meaningful and absorbing. But in actuality, the presence itself, the fact that this is here, is all power, is all meaningfulness, is all profundity, and it is absolutely bottomless. And just this presence alone will reward attention given to it, will reward engagement with it as itself, limitlessly, endlessly. So that's presence. Radiance, it presents as intrinsic characteristics, as qualities. Well, this presence is present, it's undeniably and obviously self-verifying and present, but it's got all of this stuff showing up, right? All these colors, all of this light, all these sounds, all these sensations, all these feelings, all this thought, all this, and so much more that you just can't be specified, can't be put into words. Just an infinite rainbow of range of characteristics that continually present. And these characteristics, these qualities, are presence. They are the way you know presence is present because all this stuff is present, and you know the stuff is present because it is present. So radiant presence is like a yin-yang. It's this inconceivably profound, bottomlessly profound being that shines forth as all of this apparent content. And the content is one with what it comes from. It never departs from it. All these characteristics never depart from presence. It's not like the presence is over here and all these characteristics jump out over here somewhere. Where are all these characteristics? Right here in the presence. They are presence. They are present. When you put these things into words, it sounds as if there's different words, so there's different things. But this reality doesn't work like that. Reality is one thing. I said at the beginning of this retreat is about one thing. And this reality, this actuality, the actual condition that is occurring right here, that is completely comprehensive. Nothing other than this one condition is occurring right here. That there's no additions, there's no implications, there's no additions to it. It completely and inclusively includes everything. It includes the totality of reality. Just this one fact that is completely obvious, completely explicit, just this presence of your experiential field. It is radiant presence. It is this actuality as all of these amazing characteristics that show up every instant, continually changing, continually dynamic, with infinite range, infinite bandwidth of qualities and meaningfulness, what have you. So, the first line, radiant presence alone exists. We call it experience. This is the one fact. This is the one condition. It is everything. Realization is this. Ignorance is this. Stupidity is this. Life is this. Death is this. Sleep is this. Waking is this. Dreams are this. Any other conditions that might exist that we don't have names for are this. This is it. In the most inconceivably complete way possible. Radiant presence alone exists. It is nothing more than an inherent, unstoppable, profound engagement with itself. So this is here. All the presence is here. All these characteristics, all these qualities are here. They're shining. How are they here? They're here. It's here by being seen. It's here by being known. How is it seen? How is it known? This is a profound engagement. The knowing, we call it the knowing faculty, is intimately, inconceivably, profoundly engaged with this presence, with all of these characteristics. And this knowing faculty is actually nothing other than the radiant presence itself. What is seeing your experience, this is not abstract, this is not theoretical, this is completely concrete, completely practical, completely pragmatic. What is seeing your experience right now, and by seeing I don't just mean the field of vision, I mean what is experiencing your experience is the experience itself, the radiant presence. What is being experienced is the experience itself, the radiant presence. So the radiant presence is engaged with itself. It's engaged with itself with absolute intimacy, with inconceivable depth, inconceivable just engagement. And it's unstoppable. You can't make more engagement, you can't make less engagement, you can't stop the engagement, you can't stop experience. It doesn't stop, it doesn't start, it just is. Right? It is, it always is. This is reality. This is truth, this is actuality. It is nothing more than an inherent, unstoppable, profound engagement with itself. So this fact of your experience is an intense, inconceivably interpenetrating engagement with this own being. This being is here, this being is looking at itself, and this being is seeing itself, and it is being seen. And that's what this is. That's what your experience is. This word inherent is an important word. It is its intrinsic nature that it should be so, that it should be like this, that it should show up like this, that it should seem to be doing this, that it seems to be doing. It's its nature that it does so. It inherently is like that. That's just how it is. Its nature is to do that, like the sun's nature is to shine. The radiant presence nature is to be unstoppably, profoundly engaged with itself. You know all those Tibetan and Indian sacred drawings that depict God and goddess in sexual coupling? That's what this symbolizes. It symbolizes the divinity, which is what this actually is. This is the most real reality that there is. If you want to symbolize it as God, if you want to symbolize it as the Absolute, if you want to symbolize it as anything you want, doesn't matter. But this is it. And so these images of deities and divinity refer to and symbolize nothing other than this, right here, this actual engagement with itself, this unstoppable engagement with itself. And that's what the sexual symbolism suggests, or the yin-yang is a similar kind of a thing, where it, by its very nature, is consuming itself, is completely engaged with itself, is completely in love with itself, is completely intoxicated with itself, is endlessly going into itself and exploring itself voraciously and with inconceivable depth and urgency. So it's an inherent, unstoppable, profound engagement with itself. This engagement is exploration, investigation of itself. What is it engaged with? What is it doing? It's looking at itself. It's exploring itself. It's seeing what it is. It's finding what it is. Absolute infinity wonders what it is. And so how does it go about that? It checks it out. It looks at itself. It goes into itself. It says, wow, what is this? What's going on here? And this very actual, simple, everyday, normal experience, your experience right here, right now, is this profundity exploring itself, investigating itself, checking itself out, trying to learn itself, trying to come to know itself, trying to come to a greater understanding of what it is. It's like it's looking at itself in a mirror. You ever do that? You look in the mirror and you're like, gosh, who am I? I mean, not that you actually sit there and say those words most of the time or something, but there's this slight kind of a, gosh, it's really interesting, like that person looking back at me, what this is about. I mean, that's another image of the same thing. Here is this actuality looking at itself, because there's nothing else to look at. What else is the Absolute going to look at? There's no other. You can't go find another Absolute. It doesn't. It alone is. It is everything. So what does it do? It looks at itself, and that inconceivable grandeur, that inconceivable transcendence, is actually just this right here, your actual experience. This normalcy, this absolute everyday, ho-hum, here we are, nice dinner we had, now we're here to talk and pretty soon we're going to go back and crash, This normalcy is, in actual fact, this inconceivable, absolute being with itself. It is nothing more than an inherent, unstoppable, profound engagement with itself. This engagement is exploration, investigation of itself. This is always, eternally, undeviatingly the soul condition. This engagement is the only thing that's ever happened. It's the only thing that's ever going to happen. It's what's happening right now. It's what's always happened. It's what's always going to happen. And nothing more than that is ever going to happen. Nothing less than that is ever going to happen. It's always been just exactly this, of this inconceivable transcendence, being with itself, discovering itself. It doesn't deviate from itself. It doesn't stray. It doesn't ever do any. It doesn't ever get bored with doing that and say, "Well, I think I'll go and do something else for a while." It doesn't happen. This is always that profound engagement, that profound exploration. This is always, eternally, undeviatingly, the soul condition. So what's happening right here, right now, this normalcy, is what's always happening, what always will happen. And it is inconceivably profound, inconceivably transcendental, inconceivably meaningful. You feel like it's getting a little cool in here? Maybe we could close that door and see how that feels.
The air conditioning came on.
It's a cooling air conditioner?
Yes.
Maybe we could ratchet up the thermostat a number two. I don't think we need any more cool.
But we had some special way to stop it. It comes on automatically.
Well, I'm sure there's a thermostat somewhere. Anyway, back to the show. Show must go on. Well, it's always undeviating the soul condition, so it never doesn't go on, right? An aspect of the way this is so, of the way this soul condition is itself, can present as complex interpretations of the radiant presence as being entities, worlds, histories, problems, and so on. So, this right here is always the absolute exploring itself. It's nothing other than that. It can't be other than that. It never becomes other than that. But it happens that this exploration can present as if it was interpretations, can present as if it was conceptual modelings, can present as if it was hypothetical stories and elaborations of what it is. So it might look at this and say, oh, maybe this is a world. Maybe this is a body. Maybe there's time. Maybe there was a yesterday. Maybe there's a tomorrow. Maybe the fact that everything's changing is somehow related to that it was some other way once, well, sometime, and it's going to be some other way some other time. And gee, I can remember all the ways, sort of, that it's been, and maybe that's my life, and maybe that's history. You know? And maybe I can extrapolate where it might be going, and maybe that's my future. And maybe if there's me, maybe there's others. Maybe these other shapes are entities like me, and maybe they have a history, and maybe they're bodies. And so all of these maybes, all of these potential interpretations can come up, can present themselves. Aside from the obvious fact that we experience this phenomena in our waking life, we experience this every night in our dreams. You go to sleep and you start dreaming, and all these shapes and patterns and colors appear, and effortlessly the imagination invests them with some degree of reality. Effortlessly the imagination says, oh, this is a world, I'm in a world, and here someone's coming up to talk to me. Gosh, I wonder what they're going to say. And they say something to you, and then it turns out to be meaningful, and it scares you, or worries you, or it excites you, and that implies certain other things, and other interactions seem to happen, and so on. And you wake up and you look back and you go, well, there was no world there, there were no beings there. It was just patterns of life. It was just a dream. But it clearly illustrates the way in which the power of the imagination can invest these interpretations with a seeming actuality, with a seeming importance. And the same thing is happening right here, right now. All of these, any interpretation, any way that this seems to be to you, is exactly this. It's an imaginary interpretation that effortlessly arises as a result of the nature of what the radiant presence is. The radiant presence is creative. The radiant presence is inquisitive. The radiant presence explores hypotheses. The radiant presence is imaginative. But if it doesn't recognize itself, it may think that these imaginations are somehow actual and somehow autonomously and independently existent, instead of seeing that it's spinning off these hypotheses itself as possibilities. So this is always the soul condition, an aspect of the way that this is so can present as complex interpretations of the radiant presence as being entities, worlds, histories, problems, whatever. In this apparent mode, its exploration can seem relatively inefficient. In other words, it can seem to kind of get bogged down in all these interpretations, and it's getting distracted from really checking itself out, and it's sort of spinning off into side issues of, being involved with, who said what to whom and what happened and how much money am I making, and gosh, I wonder if I'm going to get this thing I want, or if I'm going to avoid this thing I'm scared of or worried about. And so all this complexity, so it's like, hey, what's that have to do with the radiant presence? Check out this radiant presence. Why worry about this other stuff? It's just concepts. It's just imagination. And it can seem like that. It can seem relatively inefficient, relatively indirect. It's like it's missing the forest for the trees. It's kind of a good way to put it, missing the forest for the trees. In this apparent mode, its exploration can seem relatively inefficient. It's still nothing other than it exploring itself, because this is always, eternally, undeviatingly the soul condition. It's always nothing whatsoever other than the radiant presence exploring itself. But in this mode, it seems as if the radiant presence is getting caught up in its own elaborations, getting distracted. Of course, these elaborations are radiant presence. So it never actually departs from itself. It never actually leaves the direct engagement, leaves the direct exploration. But it can seem somehow as if it's getting a little bogged down, getting a little inefficient. But it can also present as a more radical engagement with the radiant presence as itself, with fewer harmonics of interpretations, knowing itself more radically, more directly. Now, for those of you that are sloppy with language, radically isn't a political condition or a philosophical condition. Radical means being with the root, being with the primal source or the basic condition of something. So it can also present as a more called primal engagement with the radiant presence as itself. So the radiant presence can be with itself in any way that it can be with itself. It can be with itself as these spun out elaborations of harmonics of interpretation, but it can also be with itself as just this radiant presence, the real root of what it is, this primal shining forth of the presence, the radiance. So it can also present as a more radical engagement with the radiant presence as itself, as radiant presence, rather than as these interpretations, these elaborations, with fewer harmonics of interpretations, knowing itself more radically, more primally, more directly. This is what I mean by yoga. Your experience right now can present as any variation of directness in being with itself. And the more primally your experience engages with itself, the more directly it engages with itself, the more radically it engages with itself, the more powerfully it recognizes itself. And this is the payoff, this is the point of the yoga. There is a point to it. It's not just a cool thing to do, and you can go to your friends, impress your friends because being all spiritual because you're practicing yoga. In this mode of engagement, in being with itself more primally, more radically, it more obviously partakes of its inherent qualities. Now, it always partakes of its inherent qualities because its inherent qualities are all there are. Even when it's spun out in elaborations and misinterpretations and complexities, what it is presenting is still it itself, and it itself is in the way that it is. And we'll look at some of those specifics of that ongoingly. But some of those are miraculousness, which means that it just is. It just is. There's no explanation. It doesn't come from it. The present moment doesn't come from anywhere. Nothing's doing it. It's not sitting on anything. It's just like poof, abracadabra. So it's miraculous. It's absolutely independent. It's not. There's nothing. It's not following from something else. It's not a result of something else. It's not something over here is causing this over here. This is doing itself. It's completely independent. It's bootstrapping itself up out of nothing. It's making itself up. It's not dependent upon anything other than itself. It is its own power. It is its own potency. It is its own actuality. It is its own elaboration. It is its own completeness. So it's absolutely independent. It's omnipotent. It's doing everything. All power. The sun, the stars, galaxies, atom bombs, human consciousness. It effortlessly, just by its very inherent nature, it's just, poof, yeah, that's how it is, sure. That's how it's just doing that. It's just doing all of that. All power that has ever and will ever be displayed, be affected, is nothing other than absolutely effortless intrinsic nature of this actuality. Just poof, there it is, no problem. You want a solar system, spanning trillions of miles and incorporating inconceivable energies and inconceivable tons of matter and amazing, dynamic energies of these incredible masses and huge motion. No problems. Instantly. Effortlessly. Bang. Nothing else is doing it. This radiant presence is doing all of that. Galaxies. Forget solar systems. They're nothing. They're less than grains of dust. Galaxies. Clusters of galaxies. The universe. Poof. Effortlessly. What a show off. Really, what a freaking show. Just this inconceivable potency, effortlessly doing everything. In capital letters, everything. That is omnipotence. There's no other power. There's nothing else doing anything. It's not like it's doing almost everything and then something else is doing that one galaxy over there. No, it's doing everything. It's omnipotent. All power is it. It is omniscient. It knows. Any knowing that happens is it. Its very presence, its very nature is knowing, is all knowing. And there is no other knowing that can be found other than it, other than this knowing. Your knowing, right here, right now, is all knowing. There is no other knowing. It is the transcendental knowing. This simple actuality right here. In this mode of engagement, it more obviously partakes of its inherent qualities: miraculousness, absolute independence, omnipotence, omniscience, etc. You notice it says more obviously, because it partakes of those qualities even when you're spun off in interpretations and elaborations, even when you're spun off in identifying with your life and your history and worrying about what you're going to do tomorrow and worrying about your health and worrying about what so-and-so is saying about you. Even when you're in that, all those same qualities are being displayed. They're just a little less noticeable because you're distracted. Not because they're not in your face and not completely obvious. So in this mode of engagement, it more obviously partakes of its inherent qualities: miraculousness, absolute independence, omnipotence, omniscience, etc. This is realization, liberation, God consciousness. All these other, epitomes of achievement, all these other epitomes of possible states or conditions to be in. This very fact, in its own nature, and what it is, just what this right here, this simple, obvious, given normalcy is, when it sees itself, when it reveals itself, when it is seen as it is, and it always is as it is. It's not like it needs to transform and become some special version of itself to be realization. Just when it sees itself, when it sees, oh yeah, gosh, look at this. This is pretty cool. That is the highest state. This itself, recognizing itself, is the very highest condition, is the very pinnacle of what's called spirituality. Realization, liberation, God consciousness. All of these labels refer to nothing other than this fact as it is, seeing itself as it is. Now, an interesting aspect of this is, even when it sees itself partially as it is, it's seeing itself as it is. So, a slight degree of insight, a slight degree of intuition into, wow, yeah, gosh, there's something really amazing going on here. That itself is realization. That itself is liberation. And there's no limit to how deeply that can go. It's not like, it's a gross misunderstanding in spirituality. Realization is some line that you cross, and on one side of it there's not realization, on the other side of it it's realization. And it may be that there's various arbitrary lines that can be drawn, but it's not like that. This, by its very nature, is realization, is liberation, is God consciousness. And any degree of it recognizing itself as it actually is exactly that. What is being realized, what is being recognized, is these superlatives. So in the practice of this yoga, you're actually engaging with the goal as your path. So any degree of recognition of, wow, what's happening here is really something. Just that right there, that is the goal. And recognizing the actuality of these qualities is the path which deepens the engagement and the recognition of those qualities, which is the goal. So it's sort of you're using the goal as the path to the goal, as the path to the goal, as the path, and it all kind of snowballs on itself. To practice this yoga, notice any aspects of the radical condition experientially. And then I list a few possibilities. Presence, radiance, unstoppable engagement, inherent intelligence, multidimensionality, non-locality or omnipresence, unresolvability, and there's myriads others that could be specified. So to practice this yoga, notice any of the aspects of this radical condition, of this transcendental condition, experientially. In other words, see that it is actually present in your experience. Don't aspire to it, or think about it, or just find the first thing is presence. Just notice, well, wait a sec. Here's my experience. It's present. Experience is present. Okay, self-evidently, experience is present. What is that? What is this presence? Just experience it. Don't think about it. Don't try to answer the question, what is it? Just feel it. Feel this presence, and in just engaging with it, it will reveal itself more. It will open more. You will find insight about it. Not in a way that makes sense to you, not in a way that you can necessarily say or even think about, but something happens. Something happens. Being, presence. This is presence. Instead of just, oh, no, this is presence. Just take a minute and just feel. Wow. Experience is present. Feel this presence. What is it? It's real. It's real. It's undeniable. It's amazing. It's inconceivable. And in that inconceivability, you are engaging with the transcendental. Yeah. Specifically, explicitly, clearly, obviously, realistically, pragmatically. You are engaging with something that is absolutely inconceivable, absolutely magical. Presence. Wow. Just that. So, you notice any aspects of the radical condition experientially. You can notice presence experientially. You can experience presence. You can sort of tune in your experience and check out presence. Be with it, feel it, let it show you what it is. Just feel, and don't worry about getting to the bottom of it. There is no bottom. Just any degree of engagement, any degree of wow factor means you're plugged in, and that's when the magic kicks in. It works. There is power there. This yoga is for real. It energizes itself because it is coming from its own transcendence. It is coming from the fact of its own absolute nature. So when it recognizes itself, it draws on that power, that transcendental power, the transcendence of the absolute nature, and reveals itself, and opens to the fact of that absoluteness, the fact of that transcendence. Now this all sounds very elaborate and fairy tale-ish, but it's a matter of just doing it, just feel it, check it out. It verifies itself. It's not something that you need to, understand or make sense of or think about. This is something to do, to experience, not to think about. So one of the aspects is this presence. You can feel this presence. Radiance. You can feel radiance. You can experience. Gosh, all these characteristics are showing up. Color is shining forth. Sound is appearing. Unstoppable is always sound. It's always sound. There's just the buzzing in the air conditioner kicks in, a bird sings, somebody sneezes, somebody's talking. There's always sound. What is this? What is this? This radiance, these qualities that are showing up. What is light? What is color? What is sensation? Unstoppably, the field of sensation is full of all these tingles that we usually think of as being our bodies. But there's just this incredible rainbow of these tingling sensations that are always just showing up, and they dance, all these characteristics, they dance, they move, they're completely dynamic, they're completely unstable, right? I mean, just check it out. Anything that is in your experience is tingling, is dancing, is moving, is dynamic, is changing. And just being with these characteristics, any small portion of these characteristics, check out a color, look at a light bulb, listen to a bird singing. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your point of contact is, because it's all radiance. Radiance is radiance, and as soon as you get to the radiance, you're gone. You're in the absolute, in the transcendental, because the radiance is transcendental. It happens to be actually absolute. And when you can engage with it as that, bang, it takes you there, it shows you that, it reveals that. Because you are that, so you can effortlessly go there, so to speak. Because you already are there. It's really just a matter of recognizing what is already the case. And the only thing that keeps us from recognizing it is our usual distraction with all of the details, all of our stories, all of our elaborations and interpretations. So, notice any aspects of the radical condition experientially. Presence, radiance, unstoppable engagement. Your experience doesn't stop. It's always here, now, always, unstoppable engagement. You can't stop it. You can't disengage it. It's like, okay, now my consciousness is not going to be engaged with characteristics. It's like, yeah, right. That ain't going to happen. Unstoppable. You go to sleep and it's still happening. Your dream is still happening. As you'll find out when you die, it still happens. This is unstoppable engagement. So there's another completely transcendental, radical aspect of this condition of the radiant presence. This unstoppable engagement. It does not unplug. It never disengages. It never pulls back from itself. It never relaxes. It's always like just completely with itself. Notice any aspects of the radical condition experientially. Presence, radiance, unstoppable engagement, inherent intelligence. Inherent intelligence. All of this functionality that shows up in experience. All of this this interconnection, this interconnectedness. Cause and effect, bodies working, digestion, communication, gravity, physics, the way matter sticks to itself. This table holds itself together. How does that happen? This incredible interrelatedness of every tiny little flash of the radiance. It all is doing an inconceivably intricate dance with itself. That shows up as all of these forms that appear, all of these patterns that appear in the radiance in your experience are all showing up with incredible intricacy and interrelationship. It's like watching a ballet or something, watching a hyper ballet of interconnectedness and responsiveness to itself. Everything is. Anywhere you look, you find the same thing. You find this amazing dance, dynamic dance of interrelationship. And this is intelligence. This is intelligence. It's inconceivable intelligence. What we, as humans, usually think of as intelligence is simply noticing this interconnectedness. So you notice patterns, and you notice, oh gosh, do you know what just happened? Such and such just happened. Oh, I used my intelligence to see that. Yeah, you did. You used the intelligence to see that. Because what you are is this interconnectedness, and of course it can see the interconnectedness and engage with the interconnectedness in the presentation of all these characteristics, of all these apparent forms that show up experientially, right? So, just looking at the form of anything, look at a person's face, look at a body, look at a light bulb, look at a tree, look at a rock. These are as they are so intricately. They're all like these incredibly, inconceivably well-tuned machines that just work. They work effortlessly as a result of just the nature of this condition. Because this is as it is, it's doing all that. It's doing all the bodies, it's doing all the physics, it's doing all the life forms, it's doing all the orbits of planets around each other, it's doing all the interrelationships of atoms in their chemistry and the way they contact each other and dance with each other. It's digesting your food. It's making thoughts occur in your head and making you able to have insight. All of these incredible functional interrelationships of all of this intricacy is intelligence. And it's omnipresent. You can always find that anytime you want. And just noticing that, noticing this incredible evidence of this incredible intelligence, this incredible patterning, again, you are clearly and obviously contacting the transcendental, contacting the inconceivable. And so again, this condition reveals itself through the obviousness of this intelligence. Multidimensionality. Whatever presents itself with an inconceivable range of difference. You look at your field of vision, what are you seeing? You're seeing inconceivable range of colors, shapes, dimensions. Things seem to be over here and over here and over here and over here. Dimensions of color, dimensions of luminosity, dimensions of contrast, just in the field of vision. And then the field of vision is its own dimension, and then there's the field of hearing. Where's the field of hearing in relation to the field of vision? They don't block each other. So here's the field of vision, right? The field of vision is very easy to localize, I guess, for most people. It's pretty obvious. And so where's the field of hearing? Well, it's where it is. You can't really say where it is, can you? It's where it is. But where the field of hearing is relative to where the field of vision is? They're in different dimensions. But they're here. The field of vision is here, right? The field of hearing is here. But there's another dimension. The field of hearing is in its own dimension. It doesn't impinge on the field of vision at all. They don't block each other. They're like, they somehow miss each other completely. And yet, it's inclusive. It's here. It's all just different, multiple dimensions present in this one condition. That's just vision and hearing. Touch, thought. Where's thought? Where's the dimension of thought? It's that, it's completely weird. It's definitely where it is, but where's that in relation to your field of vision? Where's that in relation to your field of sight? And then there's other dimensions that we don't even have classification for. If you look at, okay, here's your field of vision, here's your field of hearing, here's your field of sensation, here's your field of taste and smell, here's your field of thought. What else is there? What is that way over there? Way out there? What is that? Well, we don't have words for it. But there's something else too. Wow, there's more dimensions. And once you're there, what else is there? Is there more? Well, yeah, there's something way out over there, something. More dimensions, endless dimensions. There's no limit to the dimensions that the radiance presents as within this field of presence, within the field of experience. And simply noticing that fact reveals itself as it is, reveals itself as inconceivable, as magical, as miraculous, as transcendental. And again, is a direct contact with the actuality of this amazing condition as it is, which frees you from addiction to your small, narrow interpretations and narrations of what we're used to thinking it is. In a way, this is like a it's like a deprogramming. Someone that's been in a cult and they're all, oh yeah, Dahlfried John is it, he's God. Whatever, right? And so what do? You take them in a room and you talk to them and don't give them any sugar, whatever, right? And you say, hey, by the way, maybe that's not, maybe there's a contrary, maybe there's another side of the story. And when they see the other side of the story, it frees them from the fixation on whatever they're orienting to so addictively in the addiction to the cult. And this is very much like our condition. The spiritual challenge is that people generally are addicted to their interpretations. They're addicted to their narration. They're addicted to their story of things. They're addicted to their self-image, their life image, their history image, and they think that they're stuck in it. Think, oh gosh, I'm me and I'm stuck in my life and this is what's happening here. And most people simply believe that as a complete article of faith. They would laugh in your face if you suggested anything other than that. They'd just think you were nuts, because no, this is how it is. This is real. It's true. It's like that. And that's the challenge, because it's not true. And so this is a matter of discovering direct evidence that is contrary to that counters the normal worldview. It counters the normal self-identification. It counters the normal self-image and the interpretation of what you are and what your life is and what's going on, and that you're in space and time and that you're stuck in your circumstances and so on and so forth. You discover very directly, you discover experientially, non-conceptually, that there's something much other than that going on, something very different than that going on. And that is very powerful. You have direct evidence, direct experience of something completely other that's entirely outside of your story. It's entirely outside of your worldview. It's entirely outside of your usual version of what, hi, how you doing? What'd you do today? Oh, I did such a thing, blah, 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 blah. It's just completely outside of all that stuff. But you're there too. Right? It's in your experience. You're there. So, yeah, okay, I'm in my life. I'm Peter Brown. I live in San Rafael, and I drove up here, and I'm doing this talk, and blah, 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 blah. But there's something else. And damn, it's a huge something else. It's a vast something else. It's an inconceivable something else. It's powerful something else. It's a real something else. It's self-verifying. It proves itself very directly. And that may not erase the normalcy, but it doesn't need to erase the normalcy. It doesn't need to erase the stories. There's no problem with stories. There's no problem with the Radiance's mode of spinning off all these interpretations and narrations. The stories aren't a problem. It's believing that the stories are the sole truth that's the problem. So yeah, I am Peter Brown, sure. I live in San Rafael. I drove up here and I'm doing this talk and blah, blah, blah. But that's not what's happening here. That is not what's happening here by a long shot. It's not that that's not happening. It's that that's such a small, infinitesimal part of what's actually happening. And I know that for a fact. I am that. You are that too. And this yoga is about seeing that directly. And when you see it directly, you know it. And when you know it, you know that you are it. And that is inestimably, unstatably powerful. Because you see what you are. You see your true condition. You see your true nature, which is beyond space and time, which is literally the Absolute. You are the Absolute. Not as an aspiration or as a point of philosophy or something like that, but in actual, concrete, pragmatic fact, you are the Absolute. And this yoga is about noticing that fact. Not creating it, just simply noticing. Like, oh yeah, damn, that's pretty cool. Who'd have thought? But it's true, and it's true. It's not a delicate truth that needs to be preserved that you need to tiptoe around and be all sacred about or something. Who gives a shit? It is that way. It's the fact. You can't make it not that way. You can be a total asshole and a total jerk, and it's still that way. It's not delicate. It doesn't need to be preserved. It doesn't need to be created. It doesn't need to be nurtured. It's like, fuck it. Who cares? It's just plain how it is. Always has been, always will be. Can't be any other way than that. It is that. And since it is that, you can notice it as that. And there's certain advantages to noticing it as that, because then you get to know that you're that, and it's pretty cool. That's the long and the short of it. So anyway, where were we? So to practice this yoga, notice any aspects of the radical condition experientially. Presence, radiance, unstoppable engagement, inherent intelligence, multidimensionality, non-locality / omnipresence. Here. What does here mean? Here means this. Is there anything that's not here? Those trees are here. The sky is here. The ground is here. Your thoughts are here. If you dream, your dreams are here. These weird little trippy multi-dimensionalities that we don't have words for, they're here. So presence is non-local. It's omnipresent. There is only one presence, and it is completely inclusive. There's no degrees of presence. There's no here or there in presence. Presence is absolutely everything, and it's you. You are present in everything. When you see the tree, that seeing is in your experience. Your experiencing is present with the presence of that tree. When you see the sky, you are here. The sky is here. You are here. When you see the sky, you are where the sky is, which is here. When you think a thought, you are where the thought is, or you wouldn't be thinking it. How could you think it if you weren't in contact with it? If you weren't engaged with it? Engagement is presence. Presence is here. Presence is always here. So, presence is non-local. Presence is omnipresent. There is nothing but presence, and presence is here, and presence is you. You are present when there is presence, right? It's not like the presence is over there and you can sit over here and like, oh yeah, I see some presence way over there. Not like that, is it? You know? Presence is here, you are here. This is very directly knowable. To practice this yoga, notice any aspects of the radical condition experientially. Unresolvability. Unresolvability is a really good one. Unresolvability is fun. It is trippy. You can really get a lot of mileage out of this. You can get really high playing with unresolvability. Unresolvability refers to the fact you can't actually find anything. You can't get to the bottom of anything. You can't find what anything actually is. Everything's like a mirage. You know, it seems to be definite to the extent you hold it at a distance. When you really investigate and experientially be more and more engaged with any and every aspect of experience, any and every aspect of the radiance, it opens, it morphs, it becomes what it seemed to be. It reveals itself as more than that. And then when you're present with that more, it opens into yet more. And when you're present with that, it opens into yet more. And this is absolutely universal. This is true wherever you look, whenever you look. So, rather than having characteristics being presented as relatively opaque, like cutouts that are just sort of sitting here, it turns out that characteristics are presented like doorways, and you go through the doorways to something else, and that something else is a doorway, and you go through that, and it becomes something else, and something else, forever. So everything is bottomless. Nothing can actually be... You can't get to the bottom of anything. You can't get to the end of anything. You can't get to the center of anything. You can't get to the core of anything. And yet you never depart from this. This is that. This is that bottomlessness. This is that unfindability. This is that unresolvability. And again, this can be, and constantly is, directly experienced. And you can notice it. It's obviously the case. And again, this can be a lot of fun to play with, because you can, you don't need to spend all that money on LSD. You can just sit around and look at anything sitting near you, and you go off into it. Save a lot of money on drugs. And there are many other aspects too that we could try and specify, but it's not important, because you discover them for yourselves. The more you're with the radiant presence more radically, more primally, as it truly is, the more it reveals its unending and infinite aspects of the way that it works. And none of these aspects that we're talking about here actually exist in themselves. They're all aspects of each other, and are all even other than the way we're putting them. And this reveals itself very directly and communicates itself very clearly through experiential engagement. This is all about experiential engagement. It's not about thinking about things or figuring things out. It's about feeling your experience very directly with consciousness, being with your experience, seeing light, hearing sound, feeling thought, feeling sensation. Just that. And all of these qualities, all of these implications reveal themselves. It's very clear, it's very obvious. So this last section was to practice this yoga, notice any aspects of the radical condition experientially. Presence, radiance, unstoppable engagement, inherent intelligence, multidimensionality, non-locality omnipresence, unresolvability. These aspects are unwaveringly inherent, so always available to notice. And doing so will direct engagement towards a more radical, profound discovery of the actual condition as it is. So, when you engage experientially with these with the inherent qualities of the radiance, it directs the engagement towards an even more radical, more profound engagement. It deepens. It continually deepens. It continually reveals more. So it's like entering on a whole new journey, a whole new exploration, a whole new way of being with your actuality. And when you are with this, when you touch this experientially with any degree of profundity, it shows you how to do it even more so, and it teaches you how to do it even more so, and it pulls you into itself to do it even more so. So this yoga feeds on itself. It empowers itself. Doing it a little bit shows you how to do it more and makes you want to do it more. And it draws, it seduces you, it pulls you in. It becomes like a gravitational field where it just ends up ultimately carrying you away. These aspects are unwaveringly inherent. They're always here. They're always, any of these aspects are here to be seen. You know, the presence is always available. Radiance is always available. Unstoppable engagement is always available. They're just right here. You can just check them out. You can trip on them anytime you want. You can just be with it, feel it. And at that point, you are doing the yoga, so to speak. So these aspects are unwaveringly inherent, so always available to notice. And doing so will direct engagement towards a more radical, profound discovery of the actual condition as it is. You'll discover even more profoundly, more and more profoundly, ongoingly, forever. You know, where you seem to be, what your life seems to be, what your world seems to be, what reality seems to be, will continually deepen. And where the world that you inhabit in the future will be incredibly richer than the world you just inhabited. And so on, and so on, and so on, forever. It's like endless free fall. Revealing liberation from any apparent worlds of entrapment. So the way anything seems to be, to be trapped in something, it has to be something. And the very nature of this yoga is the bottom drops out. You move beyond wherever you have seemed to be, whatever your frame of reference has seemed to be, you will find yourself outside of it. And so, even if, however you were trapped, however you were stuck, it was within a frame of reference, and this yoga reveals that you're outside of that frame of reference. So you're not stuck in it. How can you be stuck if you're not in? There's a jail sitting here. If you're not in it, you're not stuck in it. Right? So, the very nature of this yoga is that it continually reveals transcendence. It continually reveals liberation from apparent worlds of entrapment, which are just frames of reference. I'm stuck in my life, I'm stuck in my circumstances, I'm stuck with my family, I'm stuck with my job, I'm stuck with my financial situation. Am I really? No. You look at what's actually going on here and you just go, there's a lot more than that going on here. A whole lot more than that. That renders all of that irrelevant, minuscule in relation to these other vast actualities that you are already inhabiting, that you already consist of. So this is the yoga of radiant presence. Yoga is radical engagement of discovery. Of presence is actuality, being, reality. Radiant is presenting as intrinsic characteristics and qualities. Radiant presence alone exists. We call it experience. It is nothing more than an inherent, unstoppable, profound engagement with itself. This engagement is exploration, investigation of itself. An aspect of the way that this is so can present as complex interpretations of the radiant presence as being entities, worlds, histories, problems, etc. In this apparent mode, its exploration can seem relatively inefficient. It can also present as more radical engagement with the radiant presence as itself. With fewer harmonics of interpretations, knowing itself more radically, more directly, this is yoga. In this mode of engagement, it more obviously partakes of its inherent qualities: miraculousness, absolute independence, omnipotence, omniscience, etc. This is realization, liberation, God consciousness, so on. To practice this yoga, notice any aspects of the radical condition experientially. Presence, radiance, unstoppable engagement, inherent intelligence, multidimensionality, non-locality omnipresence, unresolvability. These aspects are unwaveringly inherent, so always available to notice. And doing so will direct engagement towards a more radical, profound discovery of the actual condition as it is, revealing liberation from any apparent worlds of entrapment. This is the yoga of radiant presence. It is one thing. It is just this, your experience. It's just being with the experience as it actually is. And there's no limit to what that is. There's no limit to how subtly, how profoundly, how powerfully you can be with this obvious fact that is already happening. This simple normalcy that is right here. Just you being here. And this is what this retreat's about. This retreat is about this, the opportunity to take the time, if you feel motivated to to really be with this, to really work this, to really trip on this, to really explore this, to have fun with this, to blow your mind with this, to really see how far you can take it. You know. Or you can just be gentle with it and just sort of play with it and flirt with it and go, yeah, wow, gosh, it's really cool. It doesn't matter how you are with it, or the depth you are with it, or the obsessiveness you are with it. The point is to just be with it in any degree at all, and it takes over. It's not like you need to be an athlete or need to be competitively. I'm going to be the best radiant presence yogi that ever lived. Well, maybe you are, but it doesn't matter, because a little bit is the whole thing. A little bit is everything. And a lot is the whole thing. A lot is everything. It's all good. So to whatever degree you can be with this as an actuality, not as a concept or a philosophy, to whatever degree you can actually explore the more interesting aspects of your experience, you will be rewarded inconceivably. A little bit will bring you inconceivable reward. And the rewards, can't really be specified, it can't really be said. But the rewards are freedom. The rewards are the discovery of authority, of empowerment, of energizing, of being nourished, of being supported, of being independent. All of these sorts of qualities you discover as an actual living fact, which of course is a complete antidote to the neuroses that are implied by our normal human worldviews in identifying ourselves as some person in some social situation and so on and so forth, in some space and time and history and all these kinds of things that of course we're all so familiar with. So be gentle with this. Don't drive yourself nuts. There's going to be a lot of intensity just in the sessions. We're going to have every afternoon is going to be completely off from lunch until dinner. So take some downtime and go for walks or do whatever you like to do. And just play with this, flirt with this, be with this gently. Be with it playfully. Playfulness is a really good flavor for practicing this yoga. If you're too dutiful, or if you turn it into a job, you'll very quickly and subliminally tend to spin off into concepts. Whereas if you're playful and loose and sort of spontaneous with it, sort of artistic, but like crazy art, like spontaneous art, not like contrived art, that's a good sort of a mood to approach it in, because then it's actually most powerful when you sort of approach it obliquely and approach it surprisingly. When you try to be linear about it or process-oriented about it, it actually tends to bog down. So looseness, fun are all good attitudes. Our normal situation is typically relating to our experience in terms of our interpretation of the content. We're used to relating to what seems to be going on, where we seem to be, what our body seems to be, what seems to be happening, what the train of events seems to be, the history and the interpretation of the flow of events, and meaningfulness, and our participation in this, and trying to control or manipulate or appreciate these things in various ways. All of which is fine and doable, obviously, as we're all very familiar with. But the limitation of this mode of relating to our experience is if we do it exclusively and get addicted to it, as is a typical human condition, seemingly, we don't notice what it is actually occurring here. And it's relatively easy to discover what is occurring here simply by experiencing what experience itself is. We have the capability to do that. This does not require an enormous leap of, or development of new abilities or new, powers or something, or some sort of miraculous ability. We fortunately have all the miraculous ability we need in the inherent potency of our natural experiencing. So the trick is to pay attention to experience itself. Notice experience itself. What is experience? As contrasted with what is happening here, what's going on. In other words, instead of orienting towards interpretations of event and interpretations of circumstance, orient to the very presence of experience. What is it that is present in experiencing? And it turns out it is something. There is something present. Experience is something. In fact, it is the actual something that all the supposed somethings, that all the circumstances and objects and so on and so forth consists of. So the seeming solidity of the objects in your environment, for example, doesn't exist in those objects. It exists in the solidity of experience itself. The seeming luminosity of the objects in your experience that show up in your field of vision, for example, does not exist in the objects themselves or in the lights themselves. The light bulbs don't make light. Experience makes light. Experience is light within the bandwidth of what we think of as vision, and so on and so forth. So it's another way of looking at this is directing your attention towards the substance of experience rather than the content of experience. So what is experience made of? What is vision made of? What is sound made of? What is thought made of? And it turns out to be very doable. It's possible to engage with experience this way, because of course you already are engaged with experience this way. This is what experience is. Experience is the presence of itself, the presence of its own substance, so to speak. Of course, it turns out not to be a substance in any simple sense, but it's not nothing. It's an actuality. So by directing our attention to the substance of experience, what is present as vision, what is present as thought, what is present as sound, what is present as all these various qualities that we're used to classifying as being these various sense fields or thought or subtle energy or whatever. Outside the classifications, what is it that is actually present? And this noticing this, engaging with this, perceiving this as it is, turns out to be actually very possible, and in fact even easy. The challenge is not getting sucked into our normal addiction to relating to our experience in terms of the content, to relating to our experience in terms of the storyline, in terms of, well, what's happening here? Do I like it? Do I not like it? What are my goals in this situation? What am I trying to avoid? Which sucks us immediately into the mode of relating to experience in terms of interpreted content and so on, which is all abstraction. It's all an extrapolation. It's very much like when you watch a movie. All you're seeing is patterns of light on a screen and vibrations of air in your hearing, and yet the mind effortlessly turns this into a really involved and emotional chain of events that is easy to get absorbed in and sucked into and get appropriate emotional appropriately emotionally velcroed to, shall we say. But all that's there is really light and a screen. I mean, this is a very simple way to do it, actually. Watch a TV or watch a movie on your computer. Turn on your computer and stream some kind of video content. And now you'll go into it in your normal mode, obviously, spontaneously. You'll be with it in terms of someone will be talking or something will be seeming to be happening, and obviously you'll be relating to in those terms. And all of a sudden just say, this is light on the computer screen, and just see the light on the computer screen, and notice that aspect of it exclusively. And again, your mind will tend to get sucked back to the content, and then you can extricate yourself again and just notice, this is just patterns and shapes of light on a computer screen changing. There's no content here. There's no story at all. It's just patterns changing. And then, of course, your mind will get sucked back to the content. And this is a typical, the normal oscillation of this kind of noticing. But developing the call it focus, to direct your attention to experience itself, to the substance of experience, to the presence of the fact of experience, exclusive of or not related to what it seems to be in terms of its content, its apparent content, turns out to be fairly easy to do. And the real kicker is it's enormously powerful. It is enormously powerful and ultimately completely transforming to discover, to learn to relate to experience itself. Because what experience is turns out to be wildly beyond what we're used to thinking it is when we relate to it in terms of its apparent content. And this fact communicates itself very directly, very self-verifyingly, and the perspective that is inherently communicated in this experiencing is transformative. Of course, it's not a transformation into anything that hasn't always been the case, but it's allowing yourself to experience and participate in how wonderful and amazing it is, to arbitrarily qualify it.
Your experience is present.
Way beyond what a normal relating to it in terms of apparent content will imply.
It's hard to say what that consists of, isn't it? It's hard to pin down what it consists of, but it's completely intuitively obvious. It's completely undeniable. It's experiential. This is present. You are here. Presence is. You can feel it. It's palpable. It's concrete. It's actuality. Anything that is actual because it is present, because of presence. Anything that is not present is not actual. Even if you hold it to be actual, you're just holding it in your imagination to be actual. For example, right now you can't see your house. It's not present. It's not actual. Now we can ignore metaphysical speculation as to whether it exists or not, but it's quite clear that it's not present. Now presence is experiential. If you close your eyes, your field of vision, this room and all the people sitting around it and all that apparently, is no longer present. Right? But the amount of presence doesn't go anywhere, right? The presence in the field of vision is still there. It's just not appearing in terms of an apparent room and people and what have you. It's appearing in terms of a field of little sparkles and lights and what have whatever it happens to look like. So you open your eyes, it's presence. You close your eyes, the presence doesn't go anywhere, but it looks completely different. The room visually is no longer present. Just the field of closed eyelid vision is present. You open your eyes, all of a sudden then the room apparently is present. The amount of presence doesn't increase or decrease, right? So the presence doesn't come or go. The presence is constant. You walk up and you leave this room, the room is no longer present in your experience, but the amount of presence hasn't decreased. It just looks different. So the appearances change, the appearances come and go. What the presence looks like comes and goes, but the presence itself is absolutely constant, absolutely always here. You go to sleep even. Your entire world, the body, everything disappears, but presence doesn't disappear. So, the point is that this presence is an actuality, it's concrete. It's not something that we refer to very much. So we have this word presence, and we all know what it means, but you can't really deconstruct it. You can't pin it down. You can't find presence. You can't prove presence. You can't say what it is exactly. You can say it's the quality of actuality, the quality of experiential occurrence in real time. I mean, you can sort of spin all this complexity around it, but that doesn't really clarify anything, does it? That doesn't really pin anything down. But the important point is to see that this presence, feel that this presence is real, it's actual, it's not an abstraction. It's more real and less of an abstraction than this room. This room comes and goes every time you blink, but the presence doesn't. Every time you go to sleep, the entire world disappears, but the presence doesn't. The presence is concrete, is actual. And if it were, I was using as an example the field of vision, but of course this applies to all the sensory fields, mental experience, any other kinds of subtle experience or whatever, what have you. It all exists and occurs within presence. Anything that appears that seems to be real because presence is real, not because it is real. Everything that appears borrows its apparent reality from presence. It's a lot like, to use an analogy, it's a lot like a movie screen. The movie borrows its reality from the screen. A movie just shining in the air with no screen, you wouldn't see it. It would just, it'd just be light. Unless there was smoke in the room, you wouldn't even know anything was happening. It wouldn't be actual. But the screen gives it actuality. The movie is not actual. It's just a play of lights, but it seems to be actual. It seems to be there because the screen is there. So this presence is, I'm trying to convey to you and to encourage you to explore how concrete it is, how present it is, how actual it is. When you feel something, anything you feel, the feeling, what you're actually feeling is presence. If you touch your hands together, well, together's not a good. If you touch something that's not your body, so you feel something outside yourself, or feel your butt on the chair or something like that, there is contact, there is presence. When you stop touching it, there's not less presence. It's not the presence of, in my case, a chair arm, it's the presence of air. So the character comes and goes, the qualities come and go, but the amount of presence does not increase or decrease. The entire full field of experience is always on 10. It's always turned up all the way. It's always present. So your field of sensation is always completely present, regardless of what is appearing within it. It's, it feels very different if you're in a hot tub than if you're, having gravel thrown at you or something, But the amount of presence that's present in any of these different varieties is not different, doesn't change. The same with vision. Your eyes are open, your eyes are closed. The amount of presence does not change. What it seems to be present, what seems to be appearing within that field, the movie, so to speak, that's being projected on the screen of presence, is changing. It comes and goes. But the presence doesn't. It's just always here now. It's always this. And everything that appears in presence, in whatever kind of experiential texture it is, vision or touch or thought or sound or whatever, borrows its concreteness, borrows its actuality from the actuality of presence. The flavors themselves have no actuality. They have no impact. This chair wouldn't be hard if presence wasn't hard. So, but this is something not to think about. This is something to feel. Feel feel the presence of your experience and feel how concrete this is, how actual this is, how impactful it is. So that is a little scratching the surface of the presence side of the radiant presence. So presence is, right? Presence is here. This is presence. Whatever it looks like, this is presence. You leave the room, it looks different, but this is presence. Go to sleep, it looks different, but this is presence. It doesn't change, doesn't come and go. This is actual. Now, radiance, presence always has characteristics showing up in it. Presence never shows up nakedly. It doesn't happen. It can't happen. And all of these characteristics are the radiance. So right now in your field of vision, for example, the room showing up in your field of vision is radiantly present. It's radiance, it's patterning, it's qualities, in this case of vision, it's qualities of color and light and what have you, shape and all these various things, appearing in the presence of field of vision. Sound, there's sound, you can hear, things, various sounds you can qualify. You hear the traffic going by, you hear the sound of the room as my voice echoes around. You hear my voice, you hear these various things. However you characterize them, these are all these qualities within presence appearing. If I stop talking, the amount of presence doesn't change. It's just the radiance, it's a different pattern of radiance presented. Now, this is a hallmark of radiance. It absolutely always changes. It has absolutely no stasis. It's never static. It's never just sitting there, not moving. Radiance, by its very nature, is sparkling. It's tingling. It's fizzing. It's zipping. It's zapping. It's intensely. It's pure dynamism. And if you look at your experience, of course, it's obvious that this is so. You look at light, and it is, the patterns of light you see are always changing. You never see the same, what you're seeing right now you've never seen before. What you were seeing 5 minutes ago was a little different. You turn your head and there's different patterns. You close your eyes, it's different patterns. So the radiance is constant. In other words, what seems to be appearing in terms of the qualities of experience are constantly dynamic and unstable and unpredictable and never repeat. And they're actually incoherent too. They're disintegrated. If you look very closely into any field of experience, you'll notice a vast panorama of sort of data, of sparkles, of data points, of twinkles, of things. You listen to your field of sound, and the mind is very skilled at collapsing this unpatternedness into apparent patterns. So if you listen to your field of sound, you can say, I can distinguish the traffic, and you can distinguish my voice, and you can distinguish the echoes in the room of my voice, and any other sounds. You can distinguish rustling with people's on their chairs, and so on and so forth, whatever, right? So the mind can take this chaos of information and put it into, it's just, you can sort of categorize it into simple categories. But if you listen to the actual sound, it's just this jungle of buzzes, and they come and they go, and they're not strung together. They're not strung together like pearls on a string. There's no coherence. It just, you listen to the traffic, there's no rhythm to it. It's like watching snow on an old-fashioned TV or something. It's just noise like that. Now, one of the very clearest ways to experience this is if you close your eyes and look at the field of vision. What do you see? Well, you see, basically myriad of minuscule, tiny, tiny little flickers or something, right? And these sort of seem to clump together strangely into all sorts of patterns that don't have much stability, and they fluctuate one to another, and they jump around and they morph, but there's no real cohesion to it. There's no real coherence to what appears. There's a pseudo-coherence of the seeming patterns that are formed, but the energy itself is just this myriad of little disconnected sparkles. If you look at your field of sound, you'll find the same thing. Your sound in the instant, sound consists of just little strung together into loosely into apparent patternings, but the patternings are very loose, and the patternings are made of these little sparkles of sound. The same with touch. Touch is, it may be a little more challenging. Everyone's different. Touch is a little more challenging because it can seem to be very stable. You put your hand on a chair or something like that, it seems to be sort of sitting there. But if you really sort of go into what's the experience of touch actually like in the moment, it's like a buzzing, it's a tingling. It's dynamic. It moves. It's alive. It's not static. And it has all sorts of peaks and valleys and dynamism. And this is what the experience is made of. And again, the mind is so expert at taking all of this chaos, this barrage of information, and turning it into relatively simple patterns. Oh, that's just what my hand feels like on a chair. And so all of a sudden it's kind of simplified. But if I look at what's really there in the instant, it's alive. It's very, very active on a with a very sort of you could say with a very high frequency, a very fast sort of a. Same with light, of course. Light is very high frequency vibration, and it's easy to not notice this when you're looking at objects. But again, objects are patterns that the mind abstracts out of the light. The light doesn't know that it's objects. The light is just flashes. And each flash presents itself with a certain intensity, a certain color, what have you, right? And it doesn't hang together. It's just this vast field of sizzling flashes. And you can see this very clearly if you look at a bright light source, of course. If you look at the sky near the sun, or you look at an incandescent light bulb or something, you'll be able to literally feel it buzzing. You can feel it, it's not static, it's not inert, it's not just sitting there, it's intensely dynamic. And the dynamism is not monolithic. It's not put together into a solid thing. On the contrary, it's like a cloud, an intensely dense cloud of instantaneous events, sparkling. And so this is the hallmark of radiance, that it is intensely dynamic, spontaneous, unpredictable, never repeats, and essentially incoherent. Essentially, even though it appears in patterns that the mind can translate into what it considers useful patterns of objects and events and such, the energy itself, the radiance itself, is not like that. The energy itself is not attached. It's just individual sparkles, individual little twinkles or buzzes or something like that. This is radiant presence. And if you look closely, you can notice that your experience consists of nothing whatsoever than this. You can't find anything other than this actuality anywhere you look. It's not like, there's radiant presence and then there's something else. It's not like that. Anything whatsoever you can find in your experience is like this. Now, it's important to notice the actuality of this. Calling it radiant presence and discussing these qualities is all sort of an abstraction and philosophical and a description, and you can think about it. But this is not, the actuality is unthinkable. You can't think it into existence. You can't capture it in thought, and yet it can be seen. You can see what it is directly without needing to call it radiant presence, without needing to analyze it in terms of all these apparent aspects it seems to have and so on. And this is the important point, is to be with this actuality, which of course you always are, and you're being with what you really are, what really is going on here on the most fundamental level. And from that perspective, you can see what you are, you can see where you are, you can see how this works, which reveals itself as being a radically different situation than the sort of consensus reality worldview that maybe most or many people hold. And in particular, the implications of this, the nature of this actuality, are profound in terms of what you are, what fulfillment consists of, what life is, all of these sorts of things. And the implications include things like spiritual liberation and all these various other sort of highfalutin, exalted type notions that sound very grandiose. But the actuality is found simply in what this is, what you are already. And the only thing that keeps one from appreciating this is noticing what this is and holding it to be the various complexities that, of course, we're all so familiar with doing. There's only one condition here. There's only one thing here in one way, and it is what you are, it is what the universe is, it is what reality is. And you can and you do and you always have seen it directly. You can see it very directly. And if you can see it directly without needing to cloak it in interpretations, which we usually do, you get to enjoy the perspective that it reveals about what it is. We can talk about another aspect of it which can be confusing. It seems to be perceived. It seems to be experienced. There seems to be an experiencing going on here. There seems to be awareness operating, which can be very confusing if you think it's a separate thing. But the radiant presence itself is aware, is intelligent, is consciousness. So it sees itself, not from any perspective. It's not like the radiant presence is over here and it's seeing itself from over here. It's simply, this is here as a knowing, as a seeing, as a perceiving, intrinsically, because this is its nature that it does so. It knows itself. And your experience is it, nothing other than it knowing itself. It is not just conscious, it is not just aware, it is profoundly, inconceivably intelligent. So it can effortlessly and instantaneously look at itself, look at this amazing panorama of information and patternings and extrapolate all sorts of patternings and interpretations within it, which of course we're all very familiar with, It takes you an instant. You can walk into a place you've never been and you can instantaneously know an awful lot about it just by glancing around or just, whatever. You're just instantaneously experiencing what you see. You don't need to sit and ponder what each thing is. It's a chair, there's a window, there's a floor, just walls. You just know this instantly because of the power of this intelligence. More profoundly, this intelligence is doing itself all of the inconceivable intricacies of metabolism, of the laws of physics, of all of this astounding interrelationship of the patternings that appear in the radiant presence. this incredible sort of cross-communication and cross-correlation. Everything works with everything else. Everything obeys the same laws of physics. Everything, it works. It's inconceivable. I mean, how can something as intricate and instantaneously dynamic and self-compensating as a human body actually work for more than an instant? I mean, how can that happen? It's completely inconceivable. It's so complex and detailed and interrelated and sensitive to its own internal conditions, constantly compensating for itself in real time. How can this happen? It's inconceivable intelligence, and doing it effortlessly, spontaneously, in the moment, just doing it without forethought. It doesn't plan. There's no planning involved. It's just bang. Everything, perception, all of this, and then the more superficial functions of interpretation, like we were talking about a few minutes ago, where you can interpret, if you can get meaningful interpretations of patternings that appear in your experience in terms of objects and situations, and so you can function within things and work with things in various ways that seem appropriate. All this is being done in real time. It's just bang. There's no planning. It's not the intelligence doesn't sit and think, well, tomorrow I have to figure out how to wake up this body, and I have to figure out how to get out of bed, and then I have to figure out how to eat and digest food. It's not like that. It's in the instant. Just bang. It just happens. So that's and this is the radiant presence itself intrinsically is like that. It does this. Because its nature is that it can. The nature is that it does. So it's kind of a one-trick pony. This one fact, this one thing that is actual, this presence, this radiant presence, it does everything. Everything. Every single thing within experience, including your own functioning and the functioning of the entire world and the entire universe and what have you. It's all ramifications of one event, just this radiant presence. And again, the important point to emphasize is this is an actuality. It's not an abstraction. It's not a theory. This presence is actual. It's real. The radiance that appears in it, all this amazing information, all these patternings, all this light and sound and feeling and thought and what have you, it's all completely actual. And it is as it is. It's not as we describe. Our descriptions and our most articulate, most inspired descriptions of it are sloppy and inaccurate and don't capture it at all. But it doesn't need to be captured because it's right here. You have never seen anything else in the entire span of time, and so you always are seeing this very directly and very nakedly. So this is a concrete fact that is available without needing to abstract it, analyze it, think about it, turn it into a philosophy, turn it into a science, turn it into some kind of a whatever. It is itself, and it is available to itself, and this availability is what you call your experience. So you have complete access to this most profound actuality, just in this simple event right here. So that is a bit about this curious radiant presence that constitutes the entirety of reality.
As human beings, we're very used to dealing with intelligence in terms of logic, in terms of describability, in terms of semantic systems, in terms of being able to talk about things and say things. There's what I call inherent intelligence, which is, you might say, the inherent meaningfulness or the inherent, I call it inherent intelligence, obviously,
of all phenomena whatsoever, of consciousness itself, of all form itself, the structural aspects of physics and all these sorts of things, the structural aspects of thought, all embody a profound meaningfulness, a profound intelligence, which is, of course, irrational, is, of course, non-linear, is, of course, not logical, but it is akin to a language of its own, or a meaningfulness of its own. And as human beings, we already are doing that, because we are that. Our more logical conscious intelligence is an outgrowth of this fundamental intelligence. This fundamental intelligence is what enables amoebas to mate, what enables birds to know which twigs to pick for their nests, what enables, you look at these one-celled life forms, they don't have a brain or a nervous system or sense organs, but they can find each other and mate, they can find food, they function in the world just like we do. And yet they have virtually no parts. They have no infrastructure, because what they are is an expression of this inherent intelligence. All forms are. How do molecules know how to obey the laws of physics? How do they know how to fit together? How does, all of this astounding functionality that occurs within reality happen? It happens because of what I call the inherent intelligence, which is that reality itself has its own inherent logic, its own inherent meaningfulness, its own inherent functionality or workability with itself. And it has many properties which are confusing from the human point of view. Because again, as humans, we're very strongly biased towards logical systems and semantic systems and describability and either or. Things are either this or that. They're not sort of both and, or maybe neither, question mark. And the reason why this whole issue is relevant is that in practical terms, the essence of this yoga is in learning to appreciate the inherent intelligence, learning to tune into it, learning its language, so to speak, so that you can directly access the meaningfulness, the non-linear, irrational, infinite meaningfulness that it consists of. And again, it's very non-human, it's very non-logical, it's very non-finite. But this is doable because you already are that. You already have that. You already are engaged with that. So this is not a matter of developing a new kind of a functionality, a super way of thinking that, where you have to sort of practice and exercise and study or something. It's not like that. It's more a matter of recognizing and appreciating something that's happening already. The inherent intelligence we're all very familiar with it. How can I do this? How can I do this? There's no way I could describe what I'm doing now. There's no way I could put into words how does this happen? How can I do this? Not why would I do it, but how can I do it? How does that happen? I can do it effortlessly. I can digest my food. I can know what I like to taste and what I don't like to taste. How does this happen? How can I walk? You can't. Walking is not a logical thing. It's not a finite thing, and yet effortlessly I can do so with some competence most of the time. And this is a clear example of what I call inherent intelligence. It is an intelligence. It is a functionality. It is a meaningfulness. It is all. In human language we separate sort of functionality and meaningfulness and intelligence as if they're three separate things. But the inherent intelligence doesn't do that. It's all one. It's fractal, you might say. It permeates reality itself. It permeates what I call the radiance itself. And so coming to appreciate this, to be able to tune into this on its own level without insisting on translating it to a human level of logic, a human level of interpretation, and verbalizing it, is of the essence of making this making the leap into actually practicing this yoga versus, toying with it or studying it or playing with it conceptually. Because most of the engagement that you have with your experience is on this level of inherent intelligence. How do you know how to see? Right at this moment you're seeing like inconceivable, I don't know how many billions of photons or God knows what, right? How did you know how to do that? And yet, bang, right there, instantly, effortlessly, bang, you just know. How do you know how to regulate your metabolism? How do you know? Where does all this functionality come from? It's inherent, it's structural. You are this. And and not only that, talking about you subjectively as, assuming you're your body, the same thing with so-called objective phenomena. Exactly the same thing happens. How does that work? And how does the interface work? How does everything work together? The vast lion's share of that is this irrational inherent intelligence. It's not done by logic. It's not done by figuring it out. A baby doesn't have to figure out how to suck on its mother's breast. It's something that it has its own inherent logic that tunes into that, so on and so forth. So recognizing or learning to, let's say, appreciate or not undervalue this aspect of our experiences of the essence in this yoga. To be able to, like this morning I was saying, feel the presence of reality and let it show you what it is. Well, what does that mean? What does let it show you what it is mean? It's not going to start dictating. It's not going to say take notes. It's just, what is it? It's just this weird presence of all this incredible amorphous qualities. Yeah, and all of that is pure intelligence. But it's not a human intelligence. It's not an intelligence that you can parse into logical symbols and all that with any accuracy. But it is meaningful. It is intelligent. And so letting yourself access that level of assimilation, that level of functionality in yourself, letting yourself recognize that and appreciate it, enables you to let it show you what it is. And all of a sudden it's showing you and you're getting it. I mean, it's already always showing you what it is, and you're already always getting it. But, it's like I said, life itself is always yoga of radiant presence. But this, what we're advocating here, what we're playing with here is entering into that more directly, more efficiently, so that you don't need to go through this long, drawn-out, elaborate feedback cycles where you go through your whole life and you get a tiny bit of a clue. This is about sort of trying to ramp that whole cycle up into maximum efficiency, so the feedback is instantaneous and you're really, getting revelation and integration on an ongoing basis, and really, tuning into your own completeness much more efficiently, much more directly. And so, as I said, of the essence in this is acquiring the facility, acquiring the knack, stumbling onto how to come to appreciate this mode, this very irrational, very non-linear mode of intelligence that you already are, that everything already is, and that is fully in play, fully in effect already. So again, it's a matter of recognition, it's a matter of noticing, more than it is a matter of figuring it out or developing new skills or new facilities. So anyway, I wanted to touch upon that because it's kind of the essence in this whole thing, and we haven't really looked at that very directly. I know you all have various degrees of experience with this, and in the meditation we do, and these talks as well. So in the talks, I'm sitting here talking, and I'm saying words that are maybe semi-rational, and you're hearing them, and so that level of discourse is happening. But there's a whole lot more happening here, And trying to specify what that is, of course, can't be done because it's not happening on a level that's specifiable. It's not happening on a level of human logic and human analysis. It's happening on a level of what you can't say. What, energy exchanges, vibes, moods. Obviously that's the point. You can't talk about this stuff because it's not logical. It's not rational. It's not addressable by human logic, by human symbolic logic, by human semantic systems. But just even forget the meditations. Even in these talks, there's more going on than just words being thrown around, right? And I'm sure you all feel that to one degree or another. And so this is an example of this aspect of experience, and coming to acknowledge this, coming to appreciate this, coming to recognize this, and participate in it more consciously, more fully, is really of the essence in this yoga.